The scene you just watched is from Quentin Tarantino's ninth film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The scene was very controversial among viewers. Cliff Booth, a character played by Brad Pitt, is a fictional Hollywood stunt double, and this guy is supposed to be the master of martial arts, Bruce Lee. Many argue this is an inaccurate and misleading depiction of the late Hollywood legend, including Lee's own daughter, who said Tarantino should shut up about it, or he could apologize. Tarantino stood his ground, not only claiming his depiction of Bruce Lee wasn't far from the truth, but also saying that Cliff is a fictional character, so it's impossible to argue what he can and can't do. This controversy was fascinating to me, as it brings up a whole question of whether or not filmmakers like Tarantino are obligated to tell the truth about real people and events in their movies. This also makes you think how often things like this go unnoticed, and how much of an impact misinforming the public can have, especially if they can't tell the truth from fiction. It's pretty safe to say that every nonfiction movie has some historical inaccuracies. It would be nearly impossible to make a film 100% true to events while still being a narrative rather than a documentary. However, it is clear that some filmmakers care much more about this than others. An example of a film with smaller inaccuracies, but still mostly truth, would be David Lean's Lawrence of Arabia. While the film is mostly truth, there are a few minor inaccuracies. For example, in real life, the Arabians were uniformed and way more disciplined than depicted, and the movie has no women in it, meaning important people like Gertrude Bell were left out. These mistakes are once again forgivable, because almost everything else in the movie is entirely accurate. Lawrence really did lead the Arab revolt, massacre 1,500 Turkish troops as he shouted, until all really did charge at the Turkish column alone at Tafas. It also helps that Peter O'Toole looks exactly like the real T.E. Lawrence. On the other hand are movies with so much misinformation that they're just fiction but with real people. The problem with this, however, is that they act like they're nonfiction. One of the worst offenders here is Mel Gibson's Braveheart. I don't even know where to start with the lies here. First, Isabella, who Wallace often negotiated with and even fell in love with in the film, was only 9 years old when the real William Wallace died. It's unlikely they even met, yet she is such a major part of the movie. Wallace is also portrayed as a peasant who became a strong leader, but in reality, he was born into nobility. This battle actually happened on a bridge. There's no mention of Andrew Moray, who's just as important to this story as Wallace. These flags weren't invented for another 340 years, kilts weren't invented for another few hundred years, and this accent is just god-awful.
I am William Wallace.
My issue with this is that when viewing this, hundreds of thousands of people will believe this stuff really happened, because William Wallace was a real person, and everything about this movie suggests that it's fact. While the average person may not see anything wrong, this is cursing in the church for historians. Misinformation is a massive problem, and can completely change the public's view of historical events. It isn't just Braveheart either. Pocahontas was 9, and her name wasn't even Pocahontas. In 300, the Spartans, one of the most powerful military forces in history, fight nearly naked. Freddie Mercury didn't know he had AIDS until after Live Aid, and the band never actually broke up. When watching a movie about a true event, people don't expect to be lied to. Not many people think about fact-checking a movie like they would an article. They just expect a multi-million-dollar production to have their facts straight, and this is a problem. This is especially an issue in horror, where filmmakers will slap the words "true story" onto any movie because it makes it spookier. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre didn't actually happen. None of the events of the Conjuring movies actually happened. Filmmakers have used this term so frequently that it has lost its value. But it does make them money. And while it can be fun to trick the audience into thinking this scary stuff really happened, it's spreading misinformation that filmmakers deny for marketing. In an industry where there's so much misinformation being spread, it can be relieving to see a movie get its facts straight. But to me at least, it's even better to see a movie that knows it's inaccurate and embraces it. That's why I think some of my favorite movies are those that are intentionally historical fiction. Abe Lincoln Vampire Hunter, Jojo Rabbit, Inglourious Bastards, and even Once Upon a Time in Hollywood fall into this category. These movies are supposed to make light of history rather than educate the audience, and I think the filmmakers make it very clear that these are fiction. These films can also be used as powerful tools to defame someone like Adolf Hitler or Charles Manson, whether it be comedic or serious.
Off Hitler.
Do I think historical movies need to be 100% accurate? Of course not. While I do believe accurate movies are far more respectable, movies shouldn't be discarded or criticized because they don't follow true events. No movie will ever be completely accurate, but there are many great ones that come close. Downfall, Das Boot, Lincoln, Apollo 13, and Schindler's List are all great examples of historical movies that are done well and are true to what really happened. What I believe separates these movies from the others are that the filmmakers aren't afraid to leave out anything that would damage the image of a person or event. A good example of this would be going back to Lawrence of Arabia. Even though Lawrence was the protagonist in the film, the filmmakers weren't afraid to show the bad things he did, like massacring 1,500 Turks. No one in history is perfect. Leaving information like this out to preserve a figure's positive image can be damaging to our understanding of history. In the end, one of the main goals for many filmmakers when making historical films is to educate, and they don't need to make the movie completely accurate for that. Next time you go to see a historical movie, think about, question, and research what you are shown. While many people may misunderstand what the real Bruce Lee was like, for example, Tarantino is giving you the opportunity to question this and research it. This way, you can learn more about Lee and decide for yourself what is fact and what is fiction.